I would like to welcome everybody who's joining us this evening. We are glad that you have taken the time to join this conversation about mental health and students. Um, Lingelstown Life has been spending the month of January talking about mental health. We believe it's been something that has come out of the pandemic. It's very important for us to be able to engage in these conversations and help to normalize that conversation and really to help bring the conversation to the forefront where it really needs to be right now. Um, as a result of that, we've had Sunday messages, we've had podcasts that we've shared as well, and all of that information is available if you would like to find any of it through our website at lingelstownlife.org. You can usually find us on Facebook or YouTube, or for our podcast just by typing in Lingelstown Life, and you'll be able to find information there about us. But we are we're excited to welcome Jennifer Butts and Amber Sessoms to this stage for the evening, and I'm going to turn things over to them so that they can begin sharing with us. If you have any questions as we go this evening, you can just type those in the chat, and then as you type those in the chat, we'll keep track of those, and we'll try and do our best to make sure we answer those as we're going along. So I'm going to turn the program over to you, ladies. And again, thank you very much for joining us. And if you would just introduce yourselves and head into the program.
Thank you. Let my colleague go first.
So I'm Jen Butts. I am a social work counselor for Central Dauphin School District. My background is in counseling is mainly I've worked with emotional support at the district level, but then outpatient wise, I've worked in drug and alcohol, and then I've also done mental health outpatient counseling. My area in particular is adolescents, but I have worked with adults as well. But usually you kind of fall into a category of age range, and I've always loved working with kids, so adolescence has kind of been my focus. And then my specialty has kind of been wellness, so it's around coping skills and finding coping skills for people to help support them in figuring out the best ways to manage some of the struggles that we deal with, whether that's stress or our mental well-being and things like that. So that's just a small tidbit about my background. And so now I work for Central Dauphin as the school social worker, and I provide services both face-to-face. So I do individual and group therapy for the students, K through 12. And then I also provide social work services, so helping families get lots of things outside of the building.
My name is Amber Sessoms. So I am the school psychologist at Central Dauphin High School. I'm nearing my 13th year there. Can't believe it when I think about it. And as a school psychologist, I'm the only one in the building and focus a lot of my work. You typically think of school psychologists, if you even know who they are, that they're the testers, right? Like they're the ones that do the typical IQ and achievement type testing to identify students that need special education support. But in my role, since I've been there so long, they used to call me the testing lady, and they really had to quickly change that because obviously I have more of a scope of what I can do. So a lot of my work centers around anti-oppression, anti-racism work, and really at the core of it, which is why Jen and I both had such an affinity for Pastor George, is like being your authentic self and speaking your truth and having courageous conversations. So this, at the very foundation, is how you're doing that and you're embodying that. And it's just an honor to be with you and be in community with your members and anyone else in our school district, because this is really what it's about, like having authentic conversations, taking the stigma away and just laying it all bare and being okay with who you are and how you feel, and just holding space for that. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yes.
So what we're going to be talking about today, and again, if you weren't on earlier, but Jen and I said, we just kind of have this relationship where we just have these conversations like no one else is in the room. So join in on the conversation, right? Like, so
Please.
we are not about set and get. Like, if there's any point that you're like, I have a question about that, feel free. We can't see everyone. So, you know, I don't know if someone's moderating. So Pastor, I'll ask you if you see anything in the chat, if there's anything that pops up, if you would just let us know, that would be great. And in real time, it would be really great. But what we want to talk about is just staying informed and staying focused. We're going to be creating, how do you create opportunities for activities to alleviate anxiety? And because Jen and her specialty, she'll be taking us through and a strategy to actually embody that and do that in real time so we can practice that together, which I think is so important. And especially where I'm at currently, I really need that. So I'm looking forward to that piece of it. And that is okay, being truthful with myself and where I'm at. Looking at like encouraging proper family hygiene and healthy lifestyles, and also looking at the self-care and coping. And also what is really important in this space, right? And me understanding my identity as a Black woman, and because Pastor George, you've done work looking at racism, is understanding how all of this intersects when you're in a pandemic, when you're dealing with racial trauma and how that impacts mental health as well. So here's the thing though, right? So we're almost entering a year being, if you think about it, you remember the day that the school was shut down and we're like, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Like, it's just going to blow over. And here we are coming up on a year. So typically what happens in these phases of disasters, you get to a point, you have the triggering event, you dip back down and you get kind of back to the sense of normal. Here's the thing, we probably will never ever get back to what normal was, because one of the things is we don't need to get back to how it used to be, because how it used to be was never normal for everyone and it was never helpful to everyone. So looking at how does equity come within there, but also being like, when you go through these phases, you go through all these different channels of like disbelief, acceptance, anger, rage, fear, and you can kind of get back on with your life. We have never gotten to that phase. So thinking about, there's so much data and research that's going to come out of this because we're in this toxic stress stage. And, you know, Jen can talk about that and she'll have some slides where she can really touch upon that. But that's really problematic. And we're really at this really critical point where we're seeing how it's affecting all of us, right? So for people that might have struggled paying attention before, or maybe not, now it's exacerbated in this moment where you feel like, I have ADHD, I have adult ADHD, I never had this before. All these things are manifesting and happening because of us being in this constant state of uncertainty. And as human beings, right, we like certainty. And now we're not in that state and it's causing a lot of anxiety and fears. And part of that, how do you get through that, is keeping updated. Now, I will say, right, so we were talking about the insurrection the other week, and I said, here's how I handled it. Shut everything down. I can't engage. I can't go there. I know what I need for my own self-care, and thinking about how that affects me with my intersecting identities. I can't do that in that space. I want to give myself, create some space, center myself, and then I can engage when I know that I'm ready and centered to do that. Hearing all of that and getting all that, it just causes me undue stress that I don't need. Some people can manage it. Some people I need to know, but making sure you're going to credible sources to get that information. And even what we noticed from that insurrection was some of the information, because it's happening so fast, was actually not completely accurate. So creating some space also gives you time to process what the real truth is, dispelling these rumors and false information. So always important to go, and I'm sorry, I have a typo there, going for these appropriate news sources in the time frame that you need, and not engaging in it all day. Because we all have people right in our lives, and maybe you're one of them. So I would just caution you, if you're the person that's like, I just have to be engaged, I have to know everything all the time, that's not healthy, right? You have to create some space. You want to be informed, but you also don't want to live in fear. That's not healthy as well. So balancing that out is really helpful. Minimizing your exposure to that is helpful. Seeking support. So Jen being one of those people where I'm like, hey, Jen, I'm having a really rough day. Or, you know, that you need to have those people that can anchor you, that can bring you back to, hey, have you utilized a coping strategy? What did you do to recenter yourself, and calling those things back? Because when we're really anxious, oftentimes it's really hard to rely on those things that center us and make us safe, because you can't think about it when you're spiraling. and especially in kids, right? So you have to think about kids and their frontal lobe is not developed. So they're planning, organizing, where they're getting their information. They're really tech savvy, having those questions. So just because they seem like they might be okay or that they're not bringing anything up, encouraging those questions, normalizing it in your household to talk about it, even to the fact of, you know, I'm really struggling with focusing or I'm really irritable, and understanding and putting that into naming that and also putting into how it is in my current state really helps to model for kids. It is okay to talk about this. It's okay to talk about this is really hard. It's really hard to do virtual schooling. I've never done it before. It's really hard for me as an educator. I'm afraid going in the building. Whatever it is, speaking that and naming that doesn't put those thoughts in your child's head necessarily. It gives them the liberty and a license to be like, me too, or yes, I'm struggling too. That is really what we're talking about with liberation, where you can just name it, is freeing. And then also going with the racial trauma, you're thinking about groups that have been targeted, especially with COVID, our Asian American population being targeted. You're thinking about the insurrection. My friend and colleague who does equity work said that her church was burned. They tried to burn it to the ground the other day. We're talking about 2021 here, right? Because she spoke out, her pastor spoke out about racism. So these things are happening. And when you're invoking and stoking these fears, you have to think about those things and protect those that are most marginalized and most targeted. Our healthcare workers, all these people that have these different identities, how do you hold space for them and say that I see you? What do you need to feel safe and psychologically and physically safe in this space?
And one other thing I wanted to say too, just to add to, when we're talking about like watching things like watching the news or watching, feeding certain things within ourselves, it's really important, and it's really hard now because I think, you know, a year ago, potentially we were able to reflect a little bit differently, but now I think it's super important to know, are you feeding your anxiety or your stress, or are you feeding your care? So like thinking about which one are you feeding, because they both are looking to get fed, right? And so sometimes you don't know and you think, oh, I'm taking care of myself because this is what I need right now. My body's telling me, or my mind's telling me I need this. But really reflecting, I personally struggle with anxiety. And so sometimes when I am in these high levels of anxiety, my mind's telling me, oh, I need to get and read and read and read and read and read, but I'm not feeding my care. I'm feeding my anxiety. And I only see it when I see it in somebody else, like my mom. She's not here tonight, so I can tell you a little bit more about her.
Your mama's gonna get you.
Right, I know. At least I don't think she's here. If she clicks on, we'll all find out real fast. But when it's easier for me to see it in her, and then I'm like, oh, I do that same thing. And then I'm like, okay, Jen, you're feeding the anxiety, you're not feeding the caring part of you. What do you need for care? And it's usually the opposite of what I need to feed my anxiety. So just being thoughtful about that. Like, yes, we need to be informed, but we don't need to be over-informed to the point that we start to, you know, feed some of those other parts of us that are unhealthy and then become unmanageable. So sorry, go ahead, Amber.
No, that's a word. And I was watching Pastor George, he wrote that down. That's going to be his next sermon. So yeah, that's good. Like, and it reminds me of like holding those space. I just changed my letterboard in the kitchen, and it was quote by Maya Angelou, and talks about hope and fear can't occupy the same space. Only one can stay. So choose hope, right? Instead of fear, like those types of things. Like, what are you feeding? I mean, that's powerful. We can just stop there. We're done.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, but I mean, and then thinking about like, what do you need? Our bodies, right? And you're saying, I said earlier, this level of uncertainty that we're having because we don't know. Everything changes by sometimes the minute. So how do we create some kind of safety net and some kind of normalcy is these schedules, but understand at the same time. So this is this duality that we have. Like, schedules are really great. We need to be grounded in that, but also giving yourself grace that might change, and it's okay that it might change because of various reasons. But schedules really help, especially with the little ones. We both have little ones. Like, that really helps to keep that routine, feeling of safety, knowing what's coming. When in a state of like where we can't control a lot of things, that does help children and even adults to feel safe. Assisting kids in like these things that you're participating in, physical presence and staff check-ins, so important. making time to do things at home, right? To make yourself feel better about stressful situations. One of the things that Jen talks about, and I might be jumping ahead, but I have to go where my thoughts going because I'll forget it, was you said at the beginning of this pandemic, one of the things she said that resonated with me is that when we're in these states of uncertainty and these pandemics, we'll resort back to unhealthy ways, lots of ways of coping, right? So you might think like, I have not done that X, Y, and Z for 20 years, 10 years, and here I am having that urge to do that thing. But that is a very normal part of being in the state, but that always stuck with me. So when I find myself going back to some old habits, or just how did I feel safe as a kid when I was going through trauma, those things come up for me in these spaces and I can recognize it. Whether it's good or bad, but those are the things that come out because you need to ground yourself in something. And that's just really resonating when she shared that in a previous session. And recognizing those feelings. So again, naming that, those are your normal reactions. And we'll talk about when they can be abnormal, but these are normal feelings and it's okay to rest in that and allow yourself to feel that and just center yourself in that. Whatever you're feeling, name it, and it's okay. Your feelings can't make you do anything. But recognizing them and giving voice to them does help you to be able to process it and recognize when it comes up again, when you're in a similar situation. And just engaging in meaningful activities with your family and your cultural values. Who are you talking to, who you're engaging with? We've had several holidays. I actually buried the matriarch of our family during this pandemic, and how do we stay engaged? And we came together virtually. We did a graveside service, all those things to still kind of ground ourselves and remember our loved ones, because you're thinking that people are dying at astronomical rates. And in particular, Black and Brown communities and people that are in poverty at alarming rates. So how are we still centering and being close to our family? And I'll turn it over to you.
And I also think with that, I think that we want to stay connected for sure, because it's difficult. I personally, given my family's situation, my daughter has some medical things that go on. So I personally, other than going to work, we don't go out. I haven't even got to see my family who live in Pittsburgh because of everything. So we don't interact with anybody other than my husband, my mother-in-law who watches my daughter, and then myself, and that's it. And so the only ways that we can connect with people are through FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. And we all know that so many Zooms or being on Face, at some point it just gets exhausting, but you feel like this, like, but I'm not seeing anybody and I want to stay connected and I want to be social and I don't want people to think that I don't care. And, you know, again, I talk to my mom a lot, but like I was talking to my mom and she was feeling all this pressure because my cousins are calling, and it's like all out, like it could be when she's getting ready for bed and she feels, and I said, Mom, I remember I'm a kid who didn't have a cell phone growing up. I grew up with only a house phone and there were still pay phones and like the whole thing, right? So I remember what it was like to not have that pressure that somebody thinks you have to be on call all the time. So I feel no guilt when I come home that I'm with my child and she needs me too. And like to take that time away from her after I've been at work all day or whatever, or maybe I just need some quiet. It's been a long day and I'm exhausted, and that's okay too, to like just let it be quiet so that I can enjoy the time I'm with the people I'm on the phone with, instead of feeling like it's like an absolute need. So, okay, I'm going to take the hygiene and medical care because I'm a little nutty about it.
You both are, so it's okay.
Look, this is my whole life right now. So teaching family members based on age right now, this is my whole life in my house right now. So washing your hand multiple times a day for 20 seconds, practice social distancing, and appropriately wearing your mask. And especially even at the school level right now, just giving gentle reminders. Like I don't feel judgment about like people not understanding how to do these things the way that maybe I want them done. And so it's not a judgment. To me, it's sometimes just a gentle reminder, like, hey, don't forget, like, you know, your mask isn't all the way up. Or like with my daughter, we sing songs so that she remembers to wash her hands for the amount of time, because she's not going to want to count, or she gets bored with washing her hands all the time. And again, these aren't judgments. I think that it's hard. Sometimes people get sweaty, the mask falls off. Like it's a difficult time. This isn't something everybody is accustomed to. And we're just trying to figure out ways so it doesn't become like a conflict. Compliment your children when they use a tissue or sneeze or cough into the bend of the elbow. And even with the littles, I always say like, oh, put your, like a vampire or something funny so that they want to do it or that they feel rewarded when you're encouraging that behavior. Foster a sense of control by offering guidance on your child's prevention control. Build immune system by balanced diet, adequate sleep, regular exercise. We all know that those are things that do definitely contribute to immune system. Reassure your child that you will seek medical care if needed. Explain not every cough or sneeze means they or others have COVID. It's so funny because even now, even on Zooms, if I cough or I sneeze, my first reaction is to be like, oh, I don't have COVID. I'm like, and I mean, this is like the world we live in now. Even when I watch TV, if I see somebody cough, I think, oh, couldn't have done that. And could, you know, it's just a different time. So, but it's also about me calming myself down and being like, okay, people can sneeze in front of me. And we'll talk about distortion soon. I promise. That's like one of my things too. Self-care and coping. So modify your daily schedule to meet the current reality. Realize flexibility is needed. So when we were working from home and I have a 3-year-old in the house and I'm trying to work a full schedule, those two things do not align, right, at all. Amber was on the phone with me the day my daughter child locked me out by the pool. So that kind of shut down my schedule for the day. Yeah. As I'm crying. So, you know, she needs cared for, the students need cared for, I need to get things done, and it's hard. So, you know, being gentle with yourself that you're not going to get it all done the same way. Like you're not going to be, you know, making pancakes and making every meeting perfect and like all of those things. Just being a little gentle and flexible and being open and honest. I feel like even having the conversations we have where it's like, hey, you might hear a kid or this might change. And
isn't that the beauty in it though, Jen? I think that's the beauty, is like that you're giving yourself grace, and how we used to do things and feel like we had to do everything and be at the top of our game all the time. Yes. Because before, like that typo would have probably like, oh, that really bothered me. And I'm like, listen, yes, glad that I'm here and I showered today. Like that's sometimes where you get to in your life. But I think this trauma that we're experiencing has given us grace and being like, I need to be okay and be a fully functioning person. And I can't give 120% over here and have nothing left to feed my soul and my spirit. So all of those things have to balance out, giving myself grace and being like, it is okay that I make mistakes. I don't need to be perfect. No one's perfect. Yeah.
And even with my kids on the phone, when not my daughter Mary, but like when I text my kids at work when they were all online, and I would be texting them on their phones like, are you on class? What are you doing? If they wouldn't wake up till 11 and they're like, I'm just getting on now. It's that flexibility of like encouraging, like, good, I'm so glad it's 11 and you're getting on now.
Any small way, yeah.
Like, you gotta just keep moving, right? It's not about, what do you mean it's 11 and you're just getting like, you just gotta move with it because it's okay. It's pandemic time. It's like island time. Focus on what you can accomplish. So one of the things that I did start doing, although I love a good to-do list, my ADHD loves a to-do list. But I do every day then also write things that I get done. That way it doesn't feel like if I'm not crossing everything off that to-do list, you know, sometimes that makes me feel bad. But I don't think about all the things I did get done. So, you know, they don't always match, but there are a bunch of things that I got done that weren't on the to-do list. Like, so that's important to think about. Shift expectations and priorities to get to what gives you meaning, purpose, or fulfillment. So this has been a tough one, right? Because value systems have this has created a major shift, at least for I know for a lot of people it has, but even when everything kind of hit, I had to start thinking about all of this vastly different, like being grateful that I was getting all this time with my child that I would have never gotten before. Like that was so exciting. And I at first it was scary. Don't get me wrong. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But then to just be able to be here and be in the room with her and have all that time, I did think, wow, that's really amazing. So like it did shift, and it did that the meaning behind it and the purpose, and like even just shifting the expectations I have on myself of like, you're doing a lot, you're working from home, you're raising the kids, like you're the dinners, the groceries, the cleaning, the all of it, like that's a lot. You have to shift all of those thoughts. Give yourselves small breaks from the stress of a situation. I'm all about taking breaks as much as you possibly can, even if it's just like 3 deep breaths just to get away from something. Or we're going to talk about progressive muscle relaxation, which takes like 2 seconds. Like just incorporating things in your day to like regulate your body again, because we need to get out of those stress cycles. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Remember, you're a role model for your child. So I feel like this is great. And it also feels like pressure sometimes, right? Yeah. So for me, like the other day I had to say to my husband, I'm losing control and I'm going to flip out on our 3-year-old. So like, you have to step in right now. Yeah. Because I could just feel it was like right there. And she wasn't doing anything. It just, everything had just come to the surface. There was nothing specific. So, you know, I do want to model that it's okay to cry, or that it's okay to have feelings, or I want to say like, mommy's really frustrated right now, or mommy's feeling, you know, stressed out. But I also want to model the other parts where I'm like, mommy's really happy, or mommy's, you know, whatever. But it does feel like pressure. So be gentle. Again, all of these things are with grace and, you know, the best you can do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My favorite thing to talk about, your distortions. So, okay. So attempting to control unhealthy thoughts. So identifying your distortions. So this is like big for me because, the pandemic, well, a lot of things make me think about distortions, but like the pandemic in general is easy for me to identify them because, you know, it's easy to, I always had issues with germs. We'll just talk about that part. So like always had issues with germs, and like my mom was a microbiologist, so that kind of maybe starts to explain where all that comes from, right? So you know, we weren't allowed to touch toys in doctor's offices when we were kids. You constantly washed your hands, like all of this stuff. So when a pandemic strikes, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're going to live in a bubble and nobody ever touches us and nobody comes in and nothing goes out and like everybody stays away. But so those are my irrational thoughts around it, right? And I have to at some point get a balance, because I do have to go to work. I do have to engage with the public, and I have to find a way to do it without scaring other people. And so, you know, you have to do that positive self-talk, or I don't even know if it's positive self-talk, but like you have to counter some of that. So like taking what is facts, the best of the facts that you can get. So my sister's a physician, so sometimes it's about calling her and being like, okay, hey, I'm having a moment, talk me through it. So, or maybe it's about calling your friend where you're like, hey, you know, I'm a germaphobe and I'm having a meltdown because somebody just came in my office and didn't have a mask on, or like whatever that may be. And they
Jen and I literally had that conversation, but it was me having the conversation like, yo, this thing, yeah, that's real.
Right? Like these things happen, or like you know, it's a lot of stuff. So, you know, it's about trying to balance it and finding people who get you, where you feel safe to have those conversations, right? That's the other part, finding your safety net. People that aren't going to make you feel judged, people that can help you kind of like laugh at yourself a little and have a good sense of humor about it and make you feel cared for. Like, yes, I know you're a little kooky about your germs, Jen, and I love you for it. And here's how we're going to get through on the other side of it, right? Like, yes, we are in a pandemic and you have every right to feel this way. No, I don't think you have COVID right now in this very moment. Like, I think you're okay and we can get through the rest of the day, right? So that's kind of takes you through, examine the evidence, talk to yourself like you would want a friend to talk to you. So, having those calm thoughts, avoid thinking in that all or nothing, and then talking to trusted adults to find out if your thoughts are realistic. If your family has experienced a serious illness or death, find ways to support each other, including reaching out to friends and family, finding ways to honor the death of your loved one, and seeking religious, spiritual help or professional counseling for support. So all of these things, the Caring Place gave out great resources if you're looking, and you can find that on their website, of all these alternate ways to have to honor somebody who's passed. If you can't have like services the way that you typically would, reaching out to people's, phenomenal. And then, counseling, spiritual help, all of those things. I mean, they're all right here tonight. So.
Yeah, thank you. And so, Jen and I both have little ones. Hers is a little bit younger than mine. So this slide it really just speaks to the main thing that we want to talk about, and where I went before was saying those things that you did in the past, those coping skills, you'll see that in kids too, right? You'll see them regress. So maybe your child has been, we don't want to get away from train, but wearing underwear, not having accidents for months, years, and all of a sudden they're regressing and they're having all these issues. That is really a telltale sign that they're experiencing some kind of anxiety or something is going on with them psychologically. So yes, you want to rule out any medical conditions, but that is one of those big telltale signs that we see in children, that they're losing control of their bladder control, constipation, bedwetting, regressing to thumb sucking, all those things that they did when they were smaller, regressing back because they're feeling out of control and they're stressed out. The fear of being alone. I know for my 6-year-old, she just turned 6. Like she's super clingy with her dad now. And her emotional, now she does have epilepsy as well, but her emotional liability, like she'll go 0 to 10 and she'll scream if she doesn't know where daddy is. So it's like this connection, like that fear that she has. And that has been a result of being in this pandemic and being so attached to him. And now she has this fear of, daddy, I don't want you to get old. Daddy, I don't want anything to happen to you. So she's experiencing some of those things. So just being really mindful of that and talking through that and reading books to help her process that and creating that safety that she's developed in her little body from these things. So storytelling, encouraging expression, encouraging them to talk about things, but also watching what they're looking at. Because I will say that I'm at work and my husband is at home working Pacific Standard Time for a super busy company, and I have 3 kids and online learning, that my daughter, the little one, oftentimes is left to be on her iPad, and how we have to monitor what she's looking at and engaging with, making sure that she's safe, and all of those things. What is she accessing and engaging with, and how bad is that she's on that screen time? Again, doing the best that you can. So giving yourself grace. And this is where our family's at right now. But yeah, so all those things to say, like, that's where she's struggling, and how do you come together in terms of that in your family and talking through that. And it goes younger. So I have all of these age groups actually. So I have a 6, she just turned 6, 11, and then 17. So I'm seeing all of these things. The irritability. So one of the biggest things when we think about depression, we usually think, you see those commercials, right, where they have the cloud, it's like Eeyore and woe is me, everything is horrible. That's not the only way that it manifests. It can really be irritability. And you oftentimes will see that in the younger ones, where they might be, you think it's like this preteen things, but they're getting really snippy. That irritability could be a sign that they're experiencing some depression like symptoms. Like this clinginess, the nightmares, headaches, stomach aches, all these things. So school avoidance, we're seeing that as education in our education system across the board. Kids that really did well in school, that might have been A students, really struggling and failing. So interest in things, or disinterested in things that they used to be interested in, sleeping more, sleeping less. So Jen talked about that with the students getting out of bed later. And our population in particular struggles with mental health. So students that may have previously had anxiety and depression, you're seeing those symptoms are exponentially looking a lot worse now. And being able for them to access services. So if they can't access Jen in the typical fashion that they did before, what does that mean for them if she's become their person and their anchor? So those skills and those coping skills that they used before, might not look the same in a virtual environment. And often you have to often think times home environment, we know what we do in our field is often the biggest trigger for students. That's not always safe for kids to be home. So now you're in that toxic environment day in and day out. And that can really be hard for kids to process and talk. But just setting those gentle but firm reminders. So with my middle child, she struggles and she gets really anxious. She's really type A, wants to be an A student. Just affirming herself. So earlier, Jen touched upon just being kind with yourself and saying kind things to yourself. So I tell her, don't bully yourself. Like, we are our biggest bullies, right? We can, when you ask someone in an interview, say, tell me something, tell me your positive characteristics. And oftentimes people really struggle with that. But if you say, tell me some of the things that you struggle with. Oh, you have like 20 things you can just riddle off, right? That's how we are in our culture. It's just, we can talk about all the things that we're bad at, that we suck at, but we can't ever focus on what we're good at. So how do we get to a space where we can affirm ourselves? So my daughter, we do a book that Jen's recommended some of these workbooks for me, and the self-affirmations have really helped. So she has a post-it note she keeps on her mirror, and she says her affirmations before she goes to bed, and if she needs to recall them during the day. And I'm telling you, it has changed as far as her having meltdowns through the day when she doesn't feel like she gets something the first time. It's made such a difference in her, because you will be in your head. And when you can recognize, I'm really beating myself up, because it happens all the time. You don't ever catch it, but just being present to say, ooh, I would never say those things to my worst enemy, right?
Exactly.
Really helps you to recognize those things that you replay in your mind. What's the script you're playing and how to disrupt that and say something more affirming to yourself. It can really change the trajectory and how you look at when you do make a mistake and you give yourself grace. So all that plays into that foundation there, but being gentle with yourself. And Jennifer.
And as adults, if you're looking for something just to see what that looks like for you, Dr. Kristen Neff, it's Neff, she has on her website a self-compassion quiz that she does. She's a researcher, a social work researcher, and she has a quiz. It gives you all these subcategories of self-compassion. It breaks it all down and then scores you, and then gives you suggestions on ways to increase those areas of self-compassion that you might be lacking in. And it's really, I mean, it's mind-boggling. I just, it's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah. These are things that we all need to work on. That self-compassion piece is huge. And
yeah.
So Pastor, there's another sermon for you. If you've already done that, like, probably because you're amazing.
Right.
And just looking at like, how do these things interact, right? So we've touched upon all these things, but biologically, Jen talked about, I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with depression. I say I came out the womb depressed. Like, that's just, how it is. But I recognize that. And that comes from predisposition from my mother and all those things. So I understand and I recognize that. And then the psychological factor speaks to those negative loops that you're in your head that you might be predisposed to. And that plays into, these things are all interconnected, and also this social cultural piece. So for me and my identities and how the world sees me and how and how I see myself within the world, being a Black woman, and what that means, how it informs how I enter certain spaces, how I view myself, what I've been told about who I am and who I'm not, based on what I've learned in school, like through misinformation, through like, denoted and connoted meanings, like, was it intentional, was it unintentional? I've learned that I am less than, I learned that I don't belong. Like, all of those things, and having to grapple with that, throw that into a pandemic, throw that into current life situations, and you have your risk factors there. So how do you navigate that and understanding all of those facets, right? So even though like I have a trauma history, even though, my mother was an addict and abandoned me, all those things together make me who I am. But understanding all those things doesn't negate or make me less than, but it gives me the strength to realize, like, it is okay. I understand who I am and I'm okay with that. So, but when situations happen, I can recognize that and say, this is because of X, Y, and Z. That gives me the power to move through it and move forward. Even though there's risks, what do I need to feel supported so that I can move through? Pastor, I saw some things blinking. I don't know if that was anything that came up. But...
Pastor George. Pastor.
Oh, it's links. Oh, you're so awesome. Thank you.
I know, he's the best.
I mean, we can just work with it forever. It's fine.
The three of us are taking the show on the road.
Yeah. I'll let you take this, Jen.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. identifying youth at risk of mental health conditions. So you can see some of the things down here. So these are things that are often misinterpreted. One of the things that I did want to say is, if you're not sure about your child, it doesn't hurt to ask. Like someone at the school, or a therapist, like if you want to find a therapist, or a psychiatrist, an outpatient psychiatrist to work with. You know, I think oftentimes we get afraid to ask because we're afraid if we open Pandora's box, the answer is going to be a definite yes. Like I always think of it like, and I apologize ahead of time, I don't mean this to be offensive to mechanics, but like, it's like when you take your car to the mechanic and you know that the second you go in there, you're going to come out with like a huge bill because all these things are going to be wrong with your car. I do not get paid on commission. So like, it doesn't work that way for me. I feel like I tell kids all the time, if you come in my office, and this is just the truth, if you come in my office and you tell me you're feeling suicidal, that does not mean we are going from 0 to 100. It just means we're going to have a conversation and we're going to figure it out. Because there are lots of options in that sentence, right? So I think the best thing to do is to ask somebody who might be able to kind of weed that out for you. Because we see it all the time. And there are plenty of times where kids come to me or somebody asks me to meet with their child, or a staff member's like, hey, can you check on this kid? And I meet with them, we talk, and I go, it's fine. We're fine. They just, this is like something that's not like on the emergency end. We're all okay right now. And that I think is relieving in itself. So I just don't want people to feel like if they're worried and they take somebody someplace, it's going to be immediate, like, oh my gosh, all these things are wrong. That is not the case. Now, if that is the case, even better, because now we can address them.
Yes.
I would much rather something, it's just like my daughter. I was terrified to take her to the doctor because I didn't know what they were going to say. And then when we found out all the medical things that were going on with her, was I scared? Sure. But I was also like majorly relieved because now we can like work on it, right? And that gives you relief instead of hearing your kid like say all these things that are causing them pain and you as a parent feel helpless. Like that's an awful feeling. It's just an awful feeling. So yeah.
I'll keep going, but yeah, that's right on. And I think it's, I just keep going back to the liberation, but I think even for us, right, there's a lot of, we should have it all together because this is what we do. And then when our kids have issues, it's like, it's a bad look for parents, right? Like, I don't want to say something because it's a reflection of me. And oftentimes, like in the work that we do, like Jen and I are probably one of the people that we will probably go to self-disclosure a lot quicker than other people because I feel like that's what people need to be like, oh, like I'm not crazy. You're not judging me. We are open books and that is okay. Like there is no shame that you can bring because we've worked through that, right? Like you can't be bound by your shame. So I think there's some freedom in that as well. But we touched upon some of these things, but just connecting with your family is so key. And I love that all the creativity people have had, and also at the same time, right? Like it can be problematic. So thinking about right before my grandmother died, we got her on the Zoom for Easter. She couldn't get on virtually. She didn't have a smartphone, but we were able to get the nurse to get her on so she could hear us and she could listen to all of us chatting. And she was like, are you guys done talking now? Like, that was how we got engaged. So we figured out ways to get her connected, but it's so important. You're thinking about right now we're looking into our family tree and trying to find ancestors and all these things. So that's just really exciting, and having different family members come on and plot that together. Looking for going on walks, playing card games, these STEM activities, these cooking and baking together, I think is just, there's some really awesome things that you can do. One of the other things that you talked about earlier was saying like, how do you honor your family members? My daughter is myself and my oldest both did projects in school in 9th grade or middle school with our grandmother. So going back, and because she's much younger, like she was able to do the audio recording, and then comparing that to my recorded interview was just such an awesome way to kind of help us through our grieving process with our family. But all those things and being creative and like, it's giving you time to look through family albums, all those things are amazing to really get connected and really be grateful and just be in the moment. Connecting with friends, the same thing. I think, so a lot of our friends, I've noticed they keep saying there's movies that come out, let's watch together on, you know, let's get on FaceTime together, or afterwards we can talk about the movie together. Or right now with a group of my friends, we all have iPhones, we do the voice memo feature. I started that a while ago. They're like, we love this. So it's just kind of funny as you're going throughout the day, you'll just push play and you'll hear a series of voice messages from your friends. My other friend uses, I can't think of that now, Marco Polo. So because we're so busy, she can get on there, do her, if she's driving in her car, like she has her video thing on and she'll say something and then I'll get a ping and I'll listen to it later. But all those things that connect, game nights online. And then lastly, just connecting with yourself. And this is where, you know, Jen's just going to practice one of those activities, like what can you do? And I think one of the biggest things that she's really helped me to see throughout just being in communion with her is just really like being present and being with yourself, and like, where do I recognize that coming up in my body? And when you can recognize it, and you're like, oh, it's sitting right here in my chest or whatever it is for you. Oh, here it comes. Now, what do I need to do to deal with it presently? Instead of, because what we usually do is we'll do things to avoid it. We don't want to feel that. But it is okay to let yourself and sit with that, and then you can deal with it. And then you can go about your day. But the more and more that you repress it and try to avoid it and numb yourself, those when you get those maladaptive strategies, and that leads to all these other problems. It leads to addiction, it leads to mental health issues, it leads to all these forms of abuse. So when you deal with it, that's the healthier way to deal with it.
Yeah, your stuff doesn't go anywhere. It just sticks around.
It sits in your body. Yeah, that's not good.
Makes you feel sick after a while. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so before we practice a little bit of PMR, I just wanted to say, here we go. Elfie's starting. She's ready to share. Alpha. So before we start, I wanted to talk about the stress cycle. So like a lot of us get into that stress cycle and we don't know how to get out of it. And so when you're in those high levels of stress, you we always feel like, you know, I don't know what to do next. And so if you've heard Dr. Brene Brown's podcasts, she had one with two women who had wrote a book about burnout. And
that was a good one.
Right. And so these two sisters wrote this incredible book about burnout. But the one piece that I felt like was important to kind of like talk about tonight is about fight, flight, and freeze, and like what to do when you're in that mode, and which is like that stress cycle. And then what are the things that get you out of it right away? Well, not right away, but it stops the physical part, at least. The trauma of it is the stuff you got to work on for a while. But first thing, fight, flight, and freeze. Whatever your response is your response. Okay. So like some people feel really upset if they aren't the fighter, because they feel like the fight is the one that's like the best one. Like, oh, I should fight. But like your body tells you what to do for a reason. So if you run or you freeze, that is the response that is supposed to happen for you. So fight is not always the best response. It's not the number one response. Like, it's okay if you freeze or you run. That's what is supposed to happen in that moment. And we're going to be like happy that our body is telling us the right thing to do for us at that time. Number two is, what are things that we need, or what are things that will like get us calmed down? So these are the scientific things that they have found. And I need my little notes, because if I don't have them, I know I'll forget one, and I don't want to forget one. So the number one is physical exercise, and it can be any kind of physical exercise. So that can be walking, it can be running, it can be anything, as long as you're getting your heart rate up. That will start to get you into that ending of the stress cycle. The second one is breath. And that can be, you know, just starting to do deep breaths in any way. If you like to focus on your inhale and your exhale, if you just like to count your breaths, you can listen to YouTube videos, you can find breath apps. There's so many ways to do breath work.
And wouldn't that be true? So you're thinking about breath, like I notice my breathing is very shallow when I'm stressed, or just even throughout the day. So that really helps. And you're not getting the oxygen you need through your body to feel good, but that shallow breathing is just not good.
When we're in fight, flight, or freeze, it's all up in here, right?
Yeah.
We need to get it back down in our diaphragm. And like the only way we can do that is to kind of like force belly breath to happen. So it's kind of like that whole idea of fake it till you make it. So you're like forcing yourself to do it until it becomes rhythmic. And really the only time we naturally do belly breath without, you know, kind of like making it happen is right before you fall asleep, because that's like the natural cycle for us when we're sleeping. So yeah, belly breath, if you can get yourself into a belly breath, that's a great opportunity. Positive social interaction. So like if we were running away from a dinosaur and somebody saved us and we were like hugging and having this like emotional like a positive social interaction, right? If we're in a traumatic scenario with somebody and you connect with them, you're like, oh, I love you. We're going to have this moment forever, right? So connecting with somebody. Laughter, but I'm not talking about like fake phony laughter, like I'm talking about like deep belly, like I can't stop laughter. And if you can't get that with somebody, then reminiscing of a time when you had like one of those really good like hard laughs with somebody is enough to start to get you out of the stress cycle. A 20-second hug, at least. So it's not about the 20 seconds so much. It kind of is like you want the time, but it's more so about like standing with somebody, both of you centered and connecting for at least 20 seconds. So, you know, being able, and you can feel your body actually release when the time has come. Crying. So this is the one people are afraid of, right? Not this.
That's not.
It's like chicken soup for my soul to cry, okay? It just is. I love to cry, happy, sad, angry, like all the emotions are the crying ones for me. But it's more about focusing on the physical part of it and not feeding the thoughts that lead to the stress. Okay, so it's if you start to cry, you just want to focus on what it feels like for the tears, what it feels like to get the whole stuffy nose and like the whole thing. If you start to focus on the thoughts that bubble up the stress, that's not the helpful part of the crying. It's just the actual like being present in the cry and letting it happen. That's the one where you can like cry and let it go. The one where you start to think about the stress is the one that people are afraid of, where they're like, I'll never stop crying if I start crying, right? I've said that myself. You'll stop crying, I promise. And if you can't, drink water. You can't cry and drink water at the same time. That's a trick I use at work all the time. If kids start crying and I can't get them to stop, I give them a glass of water. And the last one is artistic expression. Any kind of artistic expression. You like to crochet, crochet. You like to paint, paint. You like to draw, write. Any kind of artistic expression. You like to rip up paper and make collages like me, then you do that too. So any way to express things that you're feeling or thinking, that's another way to start to get your body to calm down. So those are the top ones. I love all of them. Try them, see what works for you. I'm big on coping skills are like leaves on a tree. They're always evolving and always changing, right? They're never, you can't use the same one over and over again from birth till death. It doesn't work that way. You got to try new things. And sometimes some things work when they didn't work before. So always be open to trying them, even if you've tried them and they didn't work previously. I know we are on 7:25. So I got 5 minutes and I will do 5 minutes of PMR. And then if people have questions, I'm happy to stay on. and answer any additional questions, or I'll try to do a quick PMR. So the basis of PMR is just to get your body relaxed. There's two reasons people use progressive muscle relaxation. One is to help with people who have major stress and anxiety. The other is to get to sleep. So kind of is like a catch-all for just about everything, I feel like. It gets your body super relaxed. So when I am in high levels of anxiety or stress, like when I'm at work, I do like a full body all at once. So I squeeze every muscle that I have all at one time, and then I let it go. When I'm trying to go to sleep at home, I do a much longer one that takes me about a half hour, which we don't have. So I stop at each place. So I start at my feet and I squeeze my feet, and then I squeeze my calves, and then I squeeze my quads and my glutes and my back and my chest and my hands and my arms and my face, the whole thing. So I stop everywhere. And then I'm doing deep breaths throughout the whole thing. If you're looking for a script, they have them online. I also posted one to the Central Dauphin School District page for the students. So if you have students on there, they all have access to that, the half-hour long one. So we'll just do like a really short one. I'll just do a couple sections of our body. So wherever you are, you can turn off your camera if you're not comfortable having people watch you, because I totally understand that. But I'll leave mine on. So all you're doing is contracting and releasing muscles. So when you're contracting and releasing, I know it feels weird, and some parts might be harder to squeeze than others, but it's just more imagery in some ways. So we're gonna close our eyes or lower your lids, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. And when I say lower your lids, you can look at the tip of your nose, or you can look at the floor, whatever makes you feel safe right now. And just go ahead and take like 2 nice, big, deep breaths in and out. And if you've never done a deep breath, you're just gonna imagine your belly filling as full with air as you can, like a big balloon on your inhale. And on your exhale, you're gonna imagine your belly button going back against your spine, just very concave shape to your belly, like a big C. So again, on your inhale, just a nice, big, full, deep belly breath in, nice big balloon. And on your exhale, your belly button is going to fall back against your spine, that nice concave shape. So we are going to take everything from our feet all the way up to our hips. So our feet, our calves, our quads, our hamstrings, and our glutes. And I want you to squeeze everything all at the same time. And I want you to hold that squeeze for about 10 seconds until I say release. And release. Go ahead and take one deep belly breath in and out. We're going to do everything in our core area. So our hands, our arms, our chest, our abs, our back, our shoulders. So you're just squeezing everything all at once as tightly as you feel comfortable. So again, this isn't causing you pain. This area is a little sometimes difficult because this is where a lot of people hold tension in their shoulders or in their neck. So if you do feel like a tweak, you might be squeezing a little bit too hard. So squeeze as tightly as you feel comfortable. And I want you to hold that squeeze for about 10 seconds until I say release. And release. Just feeling all of the tension leaving through your body. Again, a nice big deep belly breath in and out. And last, we're going to focus on our face. So your eyes, your forehead, your cheeks, your nose, your lips, everything in your face, just squeezing as tightly as you feel comfortable. Again, not until it hurts, just to put a little bit of tension in your face. And we're going to hold that squeeze for about 10 seconds until I say release. And release. 2 more deep belly breaths in and out. And before you open your eyes, just thinking about one thing that maybe you feel grateful for, or maybe something positive that you have going on in your life. And I know sometimes when things feel really difficult or things feel really heavy, it's hard to think of something that you feel grateful for, something that feels positive in your life. But even if it's just that you feel grateful that you could take a deep breath, or that you took a few minutes to yourself, or that you learned something new, or that you had a few minutes with your kids or without your kids, or that you have family, or that you had space alone tonight, whatever that is for you, um, that you have a church that offers things like this, anything that you can take a moment just for that 1 second, and then kind of pushing that out into the world, so that whatever that piece of gratitude or positivity is, that person or that thing or that place can kind of just receive it as well. And when you're ready, you can just flutter your eyes and wiggle your hands and feet. And I just thank you for joining, and I hope that that helps you feel a little bit more relaxed. And thank you for joining us. We're ready for questions, if there are any.
Well, I can tell you that I'm much more relaxed now than I was earlier.
Good.
We fortunately made through this, and I've seen quite a number of great comments in the chat. I haven't seen any real questions that have come up.
Okay.
I do really appreciate the fact that you mentioned that talking about approaching somebody when you have a concern about mental health, that even if you're uncertain about going and talking to somebody about that, you shouldn't be afraid, and you don't have to be afraid that it's going to go from that 0 to 100. I think there's a lot of times people are just afraid that if I say something, I'm going to wind up,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to wind up with a 302 or something,
Right.
So, you know, uh, people need to understand that that's really why we're trying to have these conversations, because when people understand it's normal to talk about your mental health, just as it would be normal to talk about any other kind of health, your physical health, your relational health. It should be the norm rather than the exception.
And it's sad that we've used mental health treatment as a threat for people for so long. And that's just, it's sad, and it makes me sad. And oftentimes, even when our kids, when they do need some kind of higher level of treatment, that is the last thing that I want them to feel, that it is like we're presenting it as like a punishment or anything in that way. It's more like, it's just like any other thing. If somebody had a medical issue and needed a specialist, I feel the same way. And I have feelings about like mental health medication and needing to see specialists versus you're a PCP and like all of that stuff, because it is a specialty. So I feel like, it's valuable, but like Pastor said, it's not always 0 to 100 with us. It's not. There's so much on the spectrum of mental health and the things that I have talked to my therapist about. And obviously, it takes a while to trust somebody, and it takes a while to find a therapist that you like. And it's okay to try out therapists. I mean, you don't have to go to your first therapist and be like, "Ugh, I guess I have to like them." Like, that is not what therapy is. Like,
Right.
I when I worked outpatient, the first thing I said was, let's meet for 3 sessions. And if you don't feel like I'm your therapist, I need you to tell me so that I can find you the therapist for you, because I would rather you be with a therapist than just leave and go off the grid and never get help. Like, that is the worst case scenario to me.
Right. That was actually part of a conversation we had in our podcast with a therapist that we were talking with. She said, the the uh, the ability for therapy to really be effective is in a large part due to that relationship that you have. And so, as she said, it's better to say to the therapist, I think I need to try somebody else,
Yes.
than to continue and not have that good relationship, that good bond. That's not going to offend the therapist, and it's not going to send the wrong signal. It's going to help them to understand the connection is not there, and the connection is what's so important to make the counseling, the therapy effective.
And I've had plenty of clients outpatient wise who would say like, "Oh, everything's great, everything." And I'm thinking, well, everything's not great with me. I wonder what's happening you're doing all the time. Everything's so great all the time. But those are the times as a therapist that you know that somebody is just trying to kind of like separate from you, and you want to say like, hey, if you need another therapist, let's get you another therapist, instead of like, you don't have to fluff it up for me. Like, I just need you to get what you need. So
Yeah, and Jen,
oh,
along that same line, there was a question about like, have you ever had anyone react poorly to PMR? So to your point about like, having different things in your toolkit, have you ever personally experienced that?
have I ever had what
Someone
again?
react poorly to PMR? Has anyone reacted poorly to that?
Like, not liked it, or like had a
It's just, have you ever had someone react poorly to PMR?
Not in my experience.
Oh,
Not to say that most people fall asleep. Like, I've had people like snoring, and that has caused a problem, like, because they're snoring really loudly in a group of people, and then I'm like, I get it. Like, that's cool, but you're now disrupting others.
Right.
But like, no, but I'm not saying that it couldn't. Like, I
right.
do know for a fact, like, yoga is a big one where that doesn't work for everybody, because yoga can get really complicated and difficult, and like, that is something that I enjoy and I have used with certain clients. But like, um my poor mom, she must just die when I do things, because she knows I'm always talking about her. But like, anyway, so she has done yoga, and she has hurt herself because she overdoes it, because she also has an anxiety disorder. But like, she now she can't use it as a relaxation thing, because it's too much. It didn't work for her, and it was something that was benefiting her. So we've had to like find other things like meditation or whatever. So, oh, okay, so here's the thing. I hear what you're saying. Yes. Okay, so today I had a very similar situation personally. We do 5 or 10 minutes of mindfulness or meditation or yoga online as a staff, sometimes at East High School. And as soon as the meditation started, I started to cry, because I had some stuff that I wasn't really dealing with. Like, I was just trying to get through my workday, and it was like 2:40 and we did the thing. And then all of a sudden, like, the second I heard the woman's voice, I just got flooded, and it all just came up. And I think oftentimes that's what happens with wellness things. They give you space
Mhm.
where it makes you vulnerable, if that makes sense, to allow stuff to come up. And that's okay. if you're ready to kind of process it, and if you're not, that's okay too. This is like so non-judgmental for me. Like, I think it's just like, okay, if something comes up and it makes you feel like if you receive like I'm not ready for this, that's okay. That I feel that, I understand that. Like, it's opening space for stuff to come out. That happens. I've seen people get reactions in yoga, in meditation. I mean, like, I've seen that is the most normal reaction that I've ever heard, is if you're having something where it like stops you or blocks you, or you are experiencing some real like defense mechanism stuff occurring in that moment, and that's okay. That is totally normal, and I can appreciate that. And I thank you for being so vulnerable and honest about that, because like I meant to say that at the beginning, to be like, hey, if you start to like feel some stuff, that's normal. So thank you for reminding me of that. I'm very appreciative of that.
Does anybody have any questions? Anything you want to type in the chat as a question for Amber or Jennifer?
Or feel free to unmute. That works too.
Yeah.
And I will put our emails in the chat if you had anything that you wanted to follow up with us on.
I just want to let you ladies know.
About progressive muscle relaxation too is sometimes with progressive muscle relaxation, one thing you'll realize is, because it's like a body scan, it's similar to like a body scan. If you're already holding tension in areas because of stress or whatever, if you try to go and put tension in an area and your body's already holding tension, it can be really hard to do progressive muscle relaxation, because you're already there. Like, it's already there. So your body needs to kind of just get to a more released place. So maybe that could also be like the physicality of it can be difficult for some people, because the stress of their body's already like in there. So like oftentimes, like I'll say like, oh, we're getting to the neck and shoulders. That's where most people can really feel it, or like lower back. Some people feel it in their feet and hands, and I'll say like, if you feel this, do not put pressure so badly that it hurts, because they're like, oh, I already feel it, because that's where we carry it. We carry it all the time. So that makes sense.
I think somebody had a question. John?
No, I was just gonna say, ladies, I really, really do appreciate your time this evening. It was great to hear your information, and I definitely took a lot of notes. And I think Pastor George took down as well, as feeding your anxiety or feeding your care. I've never heard that before, and that really resonated with me. And so I wanted to let you know that I really appreciated that, and some of the resources that you've given us tonight. I was actually checking on, and I did my Selfcompassion quiz already, so I appreciate you just saying that. So I'm pretty self-compassionate, so I'm glad I passed.
Hey!
But I wanted to let you know, I know you're both probably very, very busy, but to take this time tonight, it's just wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, ladies, I'm sure I can speak for everybody in that this has been very helpful. The information that you've shared certainly resonates with me in terms of having heard some of these things previously and understanding the need to do some of these things a little bit more. So I certainly appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else does. Just to let everybody know that if you know somebody that would have benefited from this, this has been recorded, and we're going to post it on our church's YouTube page, so you can look for that. I don't know how quickly we'll get it up there, but hopefully by tomorrow sometime we can have it up, and you can just go to YouTube and look for Linglestown Life Church, and you'll find it there. And you also find the messages from our Sunday sermons, which, as I said, for the last 3 weeks, and including this coming Sunday, have all been about mental health. And again, I mentioned earlier our podcast. We've recorded 4 sessions with a counselor who's helped us to understand some of the challenges that we've all faced dealing with mental health. One of the things that I liked the most was that she sort of pulled back the curtain and explained what a counseling session is really all about. So, sometimes it's the fear, as you said, Jennifer, talking about going from 0 to 100, that you think, oh, if I go, what's going to happen? You don't have to worry about it. It's okay. So again, I just want to thank you, Amber and Jennifer, for the time this evening. And again, we appreciate your understanding and helping us not only to help ourselves, but most importantly to help the students that we come into contact with on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you
We're
so much
happy to
for
help.
holding space for all of us. You guys are awesome. I'll say
I
that.
know.
Seriously. Phenomenal work. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you both very much, and thanks everybody for joining us. And please, as I said, feel free to let others know that that this resource is out there if they want to go back and listen to it again. So thanks everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.